Well, Todd, we got the brand new HK VP9 here, 9mm. This is a pretty cool gun. Been out for a couple of weeks. We had a chance to fire this thing. Let's go over real quick what's actually in the box first. In the box, you get a multitude of things. Obviously, you get the firearm. You get 2 magazines. You get these back straps, interchangeable back straps, one large, one small, and one medium that's actually on the gun. But the cool thing is you actually get these side back straps, or side straps, I guess, that will adjust as well. Those things fit so well on this gun. Todd, I was pretty amazed. You can't even see. You can see lines, but you can't see where the marks are that these things interconnect with one another.
Right. There's no typical mold lines or anything on it. It's nice and clean. Definitely a good type fit.
Yeah, to have something that's interchangeable for the end user, to me was pretty impressive that it still fits so tight. But nevertheless, it gives you a nice seamless look on this thing. Now, we fired the thing. Todd, what did you think when you fired it?
First off, I like the way it feels. It's got a natural point to it. I really like the sight set on it. The grip, I have medium-sized hands, and so it felt pretty well. Shooting it, Paul, I liked it as well as any other striker-fired, weapon that I've fired. To include the Glock, the Springfield XD, Smith & Wesson M&P, I liked it every bit as well. To say it was head and shoulders above it, I can't say that.
What did you think of the trigger? You have a lot of time behind the Glock trigger. We're not trying to draw total direct comparisons between this and the Glock, but let's face it, this is being manufactured to rival the Glock, so let's do that. The trigger versus a Glock trigger, what did you think?
Initially, it's got a lot of take-up, a lot of slack in the trigger before it engages. It's got a nice, smooth let-off. I do not like the reset as well as a Glock. The Glock's got a very sharp, distinct reset that you can hear and tactically feel. This one is a little bit more subtle, not so much as an M&P. M&P almost has no reset feel to it at all. This one is better. I still prefer the Glock trigger over it because of the reset.
Okay. Now sights, we talked a little bit about the sights. We've got some Novak sights on this thing. As far as acquisition of target, how did you feel when it came to having to aim this thing at your target down? We were shooting at 25 yards and one as far as probably 35 to 40 yards away. How did you feel as far as getting acclimated to that sight picture?
It's got a typical 3-dot sight system. I was able to pick it up real quick, no problems there. Something that we talked about earlier on the gun, in law enforcement, if we don't have the Novak sights and you've got a straight Trigicon sight or whatever, you can actually use that sight in the event that your support hand was to be taken out of play. You can use the sight to rake on your gear or your belt to actually cock the firearm. With this one, they have these little nubs here that kind of help that. And so normally on a defensive firearm, I do not like the Novak sights because of that reason, because of the ramp. It doesn't allow you to be able to engage that. But with these little side protrusions, it kind of takes the place of that. And so that's kind of neat about it. But as far as the way they function, they pick up real clean, typical 3-dot. It's neat the way that they're not tritium, but you can charge them with a flashlight, and so they do stay lit. So I thought that was neat.
They say they'll stay lit for about an hour and a half. I like the fact that the sights were somewhat of a snag-free sight. If this was something that you wanted to conceal or anything like that, the fact that they're snag-free made them a little bit more convenient to me for a civilian that might want to conceal carry the firearm.
And then, you're looking at the purpose of which you're carrying. So there's pros and cons to both setups, for sure.
Tell me about the mag release. I know that's a little bit different. That's something that we typically see on a Walther or something like that, mostly European guns. How do you feel about the mag release on this thing?
I like it. I'm not familiar with it, so it would take a little bit of practice, but I don't see a downfall in it. It's out of the way. It's fairly acceptable. If my fingers were a little longer, I could reach it without having to do anything at all with my thumb side, but I can also release it, from this side also. So it works well. I like it. It would just take a little bit of practice to get used to, when you're accustomed to it being right here as a push button. And that's not necessarily a better thing. It's just what I'm more used to.
Right. I did notice the recoil was extremely light. It seems like, again, we talked about this when we did some of our other reviews, like the FNX. the bore axis seems to sit a little bit low, or the fact that might be just so you can get higher. Because it seems like you can get high enough to where there's not much felt recoil when that slide comes back. It's pretty easy to get back on target. I thought that was pretty convenient and nice for the gun.
Right. And it is a 9mm, so it's hard to tell because the 9mm doesn't have a real snappy recoil anyhow. But typically what you run into with a lot of polymer pistols is they have more of a torquey, twisting type of recoil to them. And I didn't notice that on this gun. Now again, if we were to run it in a 40 cal, we might would notice a little bit more, but I found it to be very manageable and none of that typical polymer twist to it.
I also noticed that on the grip, this bump right here, it's thinner, more narrow up to the top, and this bump is pretty far down in the midsection of your palm. To me, it almost forces you to grip the gun a little bit higher. In other words, if you try to grip it a little bit low, it's so awkward, it's almost impossible to even hold the gun.
It almost kind of feeds your hand to that point.
It almost funnels you in to get it where it needs to go. So I thought that was kind of a cool, and I know that's by design. It's nice that it actually makes you do that.
Yeah. Aesthetically, to me, it's prettier than any of the other polymer pistols out there. I mean, it's got a lot of machining done to it. It's got front cocking serrations. It's really a nice looking piece for a polymer gun. And typically polymer guns are not nice looking.
Right.
They function well, but they have that utilitarian look to them, and it's really a nice looking piece. If they keep their price point down, I think they got a viable piece there that they could get a piece of the market with. Now, HKs typically, they have a great reputation. They also have a reputation for being high dollar.
Well,
and so if they can get their price point down to where they can compete with Glock and M&P, I think they have a viable thing there.
Your typical civilian Glock is going to run you about $570, $579. This thing here, actually MSRP's on HK's site for $719, which blew me away because this gun sells for $600 all day long. So I think the MSRP, we usually see inflated MSRPs online, I think to make you feel like you're getting a deal from your retailer, but it sounds like the MSRP on this is really inflated online because we went all day long to find this thing for $600, $619, $629 being sold on retail, online and in person. I got this one locally at Gator Guns, and I think we got it right around $600 and change. So the $719 MSRP online is probably a little bit misleading. I don't think anyone is actually going to expect to pay that unless these things become in high demand. They're having a little bit of trouble holding on to these things. They've only been out for a couple of weeks. I think once word gets out that it's a pretty good gun, it's basically the little brother, the striker file brother of the P30. And it even accepts P30 magazines. So I think once people realize they don't spend $900 for an HK and they can spend roughly in that $600 range, you're right, they're going to compete. And I think they're going to really compete with Glock. We have to figure if we're buying these things in stores right now for $600, Glocks are $579. These are probably going to come down at some point, and you're probably going to have your choice, Glock or HK, for that $579 price.
And to me, $600 seems fair. Taking the thing down may be a little different. That's one of the things that I've always liked about a Glock is with a punch, I can disassemble the whole thing.
Right.
They're very simple and they just work. But
well, the internals of this look a lot like a Glock, but again, we've not broken it all the way down. We've just done the standard field strip of it. One last thing I want to mention about it is the ambidextrous slide release on this thing. It takes a little bit of getting used to. It's something a little bit different, kind of a European style thing again. But if you're left-handed, it's nice. It's nice to have that release like that on that side of the gun. I mean, if you're left-handed, to engage that thing is pretty easy.
And you know, typically when the Europeans build a gun, they always go here to release the slide, where Americans, we want to thumb that slide. And that's one of the gripes about a Glock is that small side release catches some flack from American users because they don't like that. But you got to keep in mind it's a European gun, and that's the way they design them, is to release the slide by doing this and not by, you know, thumbing the release down. But it's got enough meat on it to where your thumb does catch on either side. Where the Glock, that little tab, sometimes it's harder to grab if you're sweaty or something like that. So I do like that.
Well, you know, HK has a reputation for quality, and you know, in fact, if you talk to anybody from HK, they're going to tell you our guns don't break. I'll have to say that we didn't have any misfeeds or anything like that shooting this thing. In fact, the only time we had anything was the slide not locking open. Of course, that was because I was riding my thumb up on the release right there instead of below it. So I actually wasn't allowing the thing to engage when it came forward. So other than that, this thing is well put together. It stays in tradition of HK's quality. And I think that one of the things that's going to help this gun, again, sell is you're going to have the quality, the price point, and of course the looks of it. And I think a lot of these things will fly off the shelf.